AAA games are killing gaming, or at least that's how it looks like. However, they might actually be the reason why gaming could start to go in the right direction. I know that sounds confusing, so let me explain. Unfortunately, nowadays, AAA games are being poorly made. It seems like almost every new AAA game that's coming out in the past few years has been failing because they honestly aren't innovative at all. These massive companies that make these huge multi-million-dollar games just keep putting out games that seem to be a copy and paste of the previous game they put out, just with more stuff to do, which makes the game just feel boring and lackluster. It's all because these big companies are already very well established, so they don't need to try to get their name out there or gain a fan base because they already are very well known and have a massive following. They've also already put out really big games that have taken the industry by storm and caused many people to become fans of the games they've put out. The problem is that now that these big companies have created a good game, they think that they need to continue to replicate the titles that have done so well. This leads to a lack of innovation because they think they've found a formula that works really well, so all they have to do is create a new story in a new place or time frame with more objectives and missions to go for than the last game. Which, yes, this could work for maybe 2 or 3 games, but after that it gets boring because it just starts to feel like the games are pretty much being copy and pasted. There's nothing being drastically changed with them at all. For example, take the Far Cry series, which is made by Ubisoft. At first, Far Cry was good, but it felt like it needed more. So within the second game, they added a little bit more than the first one to make it feel like a step up. However, it wasn't until the third game that the Far Cry series really didn't start to take off, as the third game was the one where they really went all out and tried new things that were drastically different from the first 2 games. They were innovative as they made huge changes to the game, like the ability to craft, more ways to transport around, being able to hunt, being able to capture outposts, more weapons, a much better story, and so much more. Not to mention you were able to do it all in this huge, vivid, and beautiful jungle with lots to do. It definitely paid off for them, as Far Cry 3 was one of the best games within the series, if not the best game in the series, and considered to be a fan favorite by many people. Some would even say that it's one of the best games they've ever played. So what happened to the Far Cry series from there? Well, because of how huge Far Cry 3 was, Ubisoft, like many other big game companies, thought that they should just try to replicate what they did in Far Cry 3. This led to exactly what I was talking about, as they started to copy and paste everything they did in Far Cry 3, but with a new story and very little changes done to it. So for the next few Far Cry games, all the way up until the most recent one, that being Far Cry 6, they have been pretty much the same thing. This caused many fans of the series to stop playing the Far Cry games, as they're just not that fun anymore. There's really nothing new within the games that are considered to be innovative. Unfortunately, this is a problem that many other big AAA games are having as well, such as Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Fallout, Need for Speed, and so many more. They're all stuck in this endless loop of making the same games just reskinned over and over again. Even new AAA games that aren't a part of a series, but are new standalone games, seem to be lacking innovation as well. A few good examples are Starfield, Skull and Bones, Redfall, The Day Before, and Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. All of these games were supposed to be great games that had a lot of hype surrounding them, but ended up being mediocre at best, or just flat out terrible. Not to mention, a lot of these big AAA games have been releasing terribly broken, with a bunch of bugs and glitches in them, and even unfinished at times. This is crazy to think, as these games are supposed to be massive titles that cost millions of dollars to make and spend years in development. So how is this much time, money, and manpower being put into these games, yet they're still broken and unfinished? It just doesn't make any sense at all. You'd expect a fully working and finished game when it comes to AAA games. However, as of lately, that's just not the case. What's even worse is the fact that they're charging $60 to $70 for the standard version of these games, which is definitely not worth the money with how bad of a game you're getting most of the time. It seems like just because these big companies have the money to put out a bunch of advertisements for their games, they already know they're making a profit from their game. Especially with all the promises of a game being amazing before its launch, a lot of people end up spending $60 to $70 or even more on the game just to get scammed out of their money. It's sad that the gaming industry is like this now, or at least for the AAA gaming side of things. You see, while AAA games have been extremely disappointing as of lately, and are honestly just quick cash grabs with a bunch of microtransactions at this point, there's still hope for gaming. The reason I say this is because small indie game studios have actually been taking over the world of gaming as of lately, with games like Lethal Company, Palworld, Helldivers 2, and so many more taking the gaming industry by storm and absolutely breaking records. These indie games are setting the standard for the future of gaming, which honestly really excites me. The reason it really excites me is because more and more small indie game companies are making absolutely amazing games with far less time, money, and manpower being put into them compared to these huge AAA games. Obviously, if these small indie companies are making millions off of their game that cost far less to make than a AAA game and are blowing up in popularity, topping the charts on all platforms, then these big companies will start to take notice. Upon taking notice, if they don't decide to start making better games, then they will eventually die as a company, as no one will want to buy their games anymore, seeing as how people can just buy an indie game that costs far less and is overall a much better game. Most indie games sell anywhere between $10 to $40 depending on the game, which is a lot cheaper than a AAA game that sells for $60 to $70. Plus, the indie game offers more hours of playtime and fun, as well as are way less buggy and aren't as broken. This shift in gaming has only become possible because of the terrible AAA games that have been releasing as of lately. People are finally getting fed up with how bad these AAA games are and are turning to these small indie companies instead, which hopefully should lead to a new era of gaming where we could start to get better games that are much better quality for less money having to be spent on the game. Yes, there's still a lot of time before this change will happen, but I feel like we definitely are at the start of this change, and it's only going to get better from here on out. I could be completely wrong, and these big AAA game companies could continue to scam us for years to come. But I'm hoping with less people buying AAA games and playing them, and more people buying small indie games and spending hundreds of hours on them, that change will come. Again, this has only been made possible because of how bad AAA games have been. If they actually put out good games, then these small indie companies wouldn't be slowly taking over. But honestly, it's a good thing that things happen the way it did. These huge companies need to see that it's not all about the money when it comes to making games, and it should be more about making a game that people will love. That's why these indie companies are starting to do so well. Most of these indie companies actually care about the game that they're making and are looking to actually be innovative when making their game and try to make an actual fun game. They don't care about the money. They just want to create a game that people will enjoy. A lot of these games that small indie companies are making are projects made from a small, passionate team of people who are looking to make something that is unique and different, not just another copy and paste kind of game used for a quick cash grab. As I said, I truthfully believe that the future of gaming will see a turn for the better just because of these big gaming companies currently failing, resulting in small indie companies slowly taking over. This will hopefully lead to better games being made that are much cheaper to buy and or are even free to play. I think that the free to play games are especially good because you don't have to pay a dime to actually play and enjoy them, unless of course you want to spend money on the game, but that money you spend is most of the time just on cosmetics. Anything you buy won't actually give you an advantage in the game, which I really like. All of the money you spend on the game just gives you cool stuff for your weapons, character, or whatever else. But nothing is considered pay to win, at least in most of the free-to-play games out currently. A good example of this is the game The Finals. It's a free-to-play first-person shooter game made by a small indie game studio that is surprisingly a fairly new studio. The Finals for a free-to-play game is actually really good, and it shows as it accumulated a pretty sizable fan base. Sure, it's not the biggest game on the market right now, but it's definitely another great example of a small indie studio putting out a game that can be considered a AAA title. I think it's easily better than some of the big AAA first-person shooter games that have been coming out as of lately, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Battlefield 2042, Halo Infinite, and more. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is just another copy and paste game that lacks innovation. Battlefield 2042 launched completely unfinished, broken, and really buggy, and Halo Infinite barely gets updated, which is not good for a live service game. But then you look at the finals, and the game is extremely innovative. It launched as an actual finished game with barely any bugs or glitches in it, and it's constantly getting updated with new events, cosmetics, balances, and more. Yet the finals is a free-to-play game made by a small indie studio that has far less money and manpower than these huge titles that are putting out garbage. Again, this is what's going to change gaming for the better though, because if you look at these big AAA games, they're paying the price for their actions. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Battlefield 2042, and Halo Infinite have some of the lowest player counts in any game they've released, and have really negative feedback from most of the fans of the game surrounding it. It just goes to show that people are finally putting a stop to receiving terrible games from these big gaming companies and are actually deciding to play better made games from smaller indie studios like the finals. Hopefully this continues on until these big game companies either fix their games and start to release good games again, or eventually just whittle away into dust and end up going bankrupt. The choice is theirs. But for now, I think small indie game companies will continue to set an example for what a good game should look like and what people actually want out of a game. In conclusion, AAA games might look like they're killing gaming, but actually they are the reason why gaming is going in the right direction. The reason being is because although a lot of AAA games are being poorly made as of recently, it's allowing for smaller indie games to shine and take the spotlight. This is a good thing, as smaller indie studios are showing these big gaming companies that if you actually care about the game you're making and put passion into what you're making, as well as be innovative and try out new things, it pays off. You don't need $1 million budget and several years to make a good game. Really, a good game can be created by a small team of people who love what they're doing and want to make something special, not just put another copy and paste garbage title out that is a quick cash grab. These small indie game studios are either going to take over the market and leave the big gaming companies in the dust, or these big gaming companies are going to be forced to make some major changes to how they're making games. Regardless, I have high hopes for the future of gaming. Even though it does look like things are really bad, in all reality, things are actually heading in the right direction, and that excites me. I could picture a future with more innovative and fun games at cheaper prices, or even being free to play. For now, we need to continue to support these small indie game studios and stop buying the garbage that these big gaming companies are putting out. That way we could help to make the world of gaming a much better place. If you haven't already, the time to start is now. That's it for me though. What are your opinions on the state of gaming currently? Is it bad or is it good? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. And if you want more content like this, then subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.